Welcome to Minot Matters, presented by the Dakotan and sponsored by Shock Safe and Lock. Today, I have with me in studio a very special guest from the Minot Chamber EDC. Mark Lyman, it is great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. It's good to be here.
Yes. So before we jump into all the hard-hitting questions, over 20 years, you migrated to Minot from the great state of Utah?
Yeah, I was living there. I just graduated with a broadcast journalism degree, and then I needed a job. Needed to not be working at a golf course and living with my parents. And so I'd applied to a lot of different places, and Minot, North Dakota took a chance on me, KMOT. I moved there, moved here for that job. Thought I'd be here for just my 18 months of my first contract, and it's been over 20 years.
20 years. Yeah, Kim was telling me that you worked together a little bit at KMOT. What was it about Minot that got you to stick?
You know, there were probably a handful of things, to be quite honest. One, it felt like I just felt comfortable.
Okay.
It felt good. It didn't feel like at any point I was like, man, I'm missing something huge in my life.
Right.
And at that point, about a year and a half in, I just gotten married. Her parents, so my wife's parents, were still here in town, and we're going to be here for another 10 years.
Right.
And so we were starting to talk about family and putting down roots, and we decided this is just as good as any.
Yeah.
And probably way better than most. And the job was good. I felt comfortable. So just kept going with it.
Very good. Very good. It seems like a lot of people, when they hear Minot and they get placed in here, they look at the contract that they're coming here with or something similar, and they
say, well, I'm done with this place here soon.
Exactly.
Right? But then it grows on you.
It does.
And it's a quiet, it's not a pressure filled, hey, you got to stay here. It's more like a, hey, you're one of us.
Right.
This is a good place. Make it a good place.
Yep.
Continue helping us make it a good place. I think that's what the mindset's been here for the last at least 20 years that I can recall.
Right. We moved here 15 years ago, and that was a lot of that community that actually cared about you, that you were actually a person, no longer just someone to get around on the street that you're walking past, but people actually care about each other, and so it makes Minot a wonderful thing. About 3 years ago now, I guess 2.5 years ago, you joined the Chamber EDC.
Yep.
That seems like a pretty major transition.
So yeah, and I had done a couple different careers. I had worked at the university on the staff side as the PR and spokesperson under Dr. Fuller. That was a great experience to get out of broadcasting and into PR, marketing, advertising. Did 8 fabulous years working with Odney and wore a lot of different hats there, many times helping out with public relations or public information for construction projects, the downtown reconstruction over 3 years, helping out with that. And those were great experiences.
Right.
And I knew I always wanted to do something that, as corny as it sounds, makes a difference. You know, something that says, I don't just go to make someone a buck at a company, or I don't just go to, check a box, do the same job over and over again. Had to be something challenging every day. It had to be working with the community, and had to be pushing forward important quality of life initiatives. And so the Chamber does that.
Right.
And so when that opportunity presented itself, I applied, and there was a good opportunity there. John McMartin hired me, and I felt like currently working under Brecca Kramer, it's just a great environment. It's good people, a lot of good volunteers, great board of directors, really just a good forward-thinking vibe at the organization.
That's fantastic to hear. And of course, you probably worked with Brecca maybe a little bit at Odney.
Oh, yes, yeah. Brecca and I were there. So she was my boss there for 8 years, and now my boss at the Chamber EDC.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Paths keep crossing. So the Chamber EDC, it was around that time also that they transitioned to actually merge together, if my understanding is correct, right?
Yeah. So that was the Minot Chamber of Commerce, or Minot Area Chamber of Commerce, and Minot Area Development Corporation. So maybe what other communities might be familiar with, the classic chamber, we serve our member investors, and then the economic development wing, which would be we're looking to retain and attract new businesses. And they found that over the years that there was a lot of services that were overlapping, or a lot of spaces that they were both in.
Right.
And they could find some synergies and get some cost savings and really be a stronger organization together.
Yeah.
So they merged. Well, it had been early 2021, I think, if I've got my date right, late 2020. So that organization's been great. Minot Area Chamber EDC, or MAC EDC is the lengthy acronym, but it's a great organization. We have a mission and a vision to be that go-to organization to improve the business environment and quality of life initiatives.
It's awesome. Yeah, it seems in the past couple of years there's been an uptick, and it's not necessarily just with the change of leadership, because I think John McMartin did a good job for many years, but it seems like there's really been an uptick with a greater focus from the Minot Chamber that it can begin to be felt by members of the chamber and by citizens too, I hope. So kudos on that.
Yeah, thank you. It's a team organization and a lot of volunteers, hundreds of volunteers, dozens of committees, strong board of directors, really good staff.
So let's talk about Minot and the developments that have happened. You joined right after the pandemic.
Yeah, about a year after it started. Yep.
So that would be a really, really interesting time to, change any employment, let alone go to a community-centered employment. What was the feedback, if any, that you were getting from some of the businesses of how the pandemic affected their business before we step into the range of the last 20 years?
Yeah, good question, Jonathan. I think it was all over the place. Some people were able to ride the pandemic out fairly well.
Yeah.
Either they took advantage of, and I don't say that in a bad way, they took advantage of PPP loans, or they said, hey, we can shift our restaurant and do something different, better, and stay afloat.
Right.
Other people didn't survive, and that's not good. You don't want to see businesses go under or people struggle. Some businesses thrived. Oil and gas dipped really fast, then came back up. And so we actually saw a growth by the end of the pandemic in oil and gas companies here in the community. No one's going to wish for that again, clearly. But I think a lot of businesses learned and grew. And as a result of the pandemic, yes, sometimes we're really, really tough.
Yeah.
But I think we also learned we can do tough things.
Right. It's amazing sometimes what pressure does to innovation and how it really breeds innovation.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it probably made, restaurants is a great example of that. They had to get innovative if they're going to stay open. Yes. People were not going to visit the restaurant.
And thankfully in our economy, let's be pretty blunt. Our economy is built around 3 or 4 different big pillars. And, the Air Force Base wasn't going to go anywhere. You weren't going to lose your job. We still need national security, even though it was a pandemic.
Yes.
The healthcare community, Trinity Health employs over 2,500 people.
Right.
They clearly weren't going to go anywhere in the middle of a pandemic. It was tough, really tough for them.
Right.
But they were hiring and still are and still will be. And then the ag community, people still need to eat.
Right.
So of all the communities across the U.S., not that we're bulletproof, but it's one of those where you're like, we can do this. We can come out just fine, if not ahead, because we didn't have entire sectors that fell apart.
Right. And some of it probably goes back to what you mentioned in the beginning of why you even stuck in Minot, and that's the community of Minot and just being able to care about each other.
Yeah, very similar to what we experienced during the flood, right? A
Right.
lot of businesses, a lot of individuals, a lot of homes were opened up to just make things work, because they care about their neighbor.
Right.
And that's true of the business community.
Very well. We have a lot of amazing things happening in Minot. So if we just went down a very abbreviated list, we just have the Trinity Hospital. They just moved. We have a new high school coming in. So that's going to be a huge transition. Something you mentioned beforehand was the tracks that's coming in next to the new hospital. There's a steady stream of new restaurants coming in, new businesses coming in. Let's talk about the growth of Minot over the past however many years. You would be able to define that better.
20 years ago, I'll remind us all, we were build a couple of dozen homes a year, maybe 50 homes a year at most. Be grateful if a new business showed up once a year. 36,000 people in Minot, really quiet. It was interesting to me to always see from Coldwell Banker every year the same press release while I was a news reporter that said you can find the cheapest home in the U.S. in Minot, North Dakota. Now, you might still be able to find a bottom third cheapest home in the U.S. in North Dakota because home prices are out of whack right now.
Yeah.
But the reality is we were not going anywhere fast 20 years ago. We were still there. Still moving somewhat, had some ebbs and flows 20 years ago, but we've really grown. 30% population growth, almost 50,000 people.
Do you think we really have 50,000? I know there was a lot of push at the census time.
Yeah, 48,666 or whatever that number is. 225. Yeah, I think that there's genuinely at or near 50,000 people in our community. Now, whether or not we counted them all, that's a whole nother census conversation.
Yep.
But I like the fact that you pointed out the second high school and the hospital. I'd also point out things like growth at the Mesa.
Yes.
You know, and I'm not an ice skater. I fall on my face with that. But I see that as a huge incentive, a huge bonus.
Right.
Where the Roosevelt Zoo has been the last 10 years since the flood. The addition of the Magic City Discovery Center, and I know we'll go into that a little bit later, but there are quality of life pieces that we've added to our community that say to people, because we've gotten younger by 5 to 8 years.
Wow.
The average population, we're 33 years old is the average person in Minot.
That's incredible.
33. Not 45 anymore like it was 20 years ago.
That's huge.
So because of that, we have to do and say and be things that are younger.
Right.
And more family inviting and more, and they say things to the military like, we don't want you to separate after 6 years and then leave. We want you to separate, well, maybe never, but if you're going to separate after 6 years, stay in Minot.
Right.
Call Minot home. Or at 10 years or 20 years, or maybe you retire as a master sergeant or a captain or a colonel, retire and then come here.
Right.
You know, this is your new home. We love you. You make us better. And so that's one thing that I'm really proud of the last 10, 15 years is our community as a whole, in many different ways, many different people, many different organizations, has said we can be better and we're not going to settle.
No.
The Children's Museum didn't settle.
Right.
Trinity didn't settle.
You're right.
We didn't just say, well, it's good enough to renovate the old this down the road, or you know what, I can only raise $5 million instead of 20. I'll just do a $5 million children's museum. You know, whatever it might be. We have to say that's not good enough. We can do the best, not just okay.
Right. That's a big point right there, that we don't settle, because so many times you see that happening and it doesn't lead to the greatness that you guys are aspiring for the Minot community. You look at just touring the Trinity Hospital. It's incredible.
It's gorgeous.
It's an incredible facility, a gorgeous facility.
Patient-focused and just the perfect way to do it.
Right. Yeah. And what would have happened if we just innovated the existing hospital? It would have been nowhere near.
It would have been quite the sparkling jewel that it is.
Right. You wouldn't be able to get the new talent and stuff like that. And you also wouldn't be able to get the young ones to stay, because that's a huge problem that I'm sure you guys have had discussions about, of how do we lower that average age, which you guys have done. Yep. So great job there. The new high school going in on North Hill, there's been a lot of discussion about that. Some good, some bad. I think overall it's going to be a positive thing. In the immediate, it's going to be a terrible thing because it's change, and we don't love change.
Averse to change,
right?
But unless it's $1 million more in your pocket, that's the kind of change.
That's the kind of change I want, right? Yeah. But in the long run, what kind of impact do you see that making on Minot and really North Hill?
Great question, Jonathan. I'll remind people, and I'll back up 25, 30 years ago now. So when ING came to town, I'll just remind people that had over 1,000 jobs in that building of about 10,000 square feet. And that was a gorgeous, well-used, well-run facility for decades. In part, that facility came here because of the Magic Fund.
Okay.
And that was a massive win, because getting a call center that was an inbound call center, not an outbound call center, is key.
Okay.
You didn't want the outbound necessarily back in the day. That's the best we could do to grow our economy. Well, fast forward to the last 5 years, and that need was not there as much. And they went down to 300 and then 200 people, and a lot of them working at home.
Yeah.
And no one can fault them for changing their business model.
Right.
They just no longer needed that. Well, one thing that was put in as a caveat to the contract was essentially, you can't sell this building.
Okay.
If we're going to give you funding, we're going to attract you here and help you build the building, you can't just up and sell it.
Yes.
So that leads to really a $10, $15, $20 million valued donation that they sold to the school district for $10.
$10.
And I remember that was one of my last meetings as a school board member. I remember accepting, as a group, we accepted that donation. And it's just like, holy cow. We just did the right thing times 10 for our community.
Right.
Yes, it's going to take 2 or 3 years. And yes, that change is going to feel tough at times, because teachers are now going to be spread into different spots. And now we're going to have rival high schools. And, well, folks, we're a town of 50,000 people.
Yeah.
This isn't a town of 10 or 20 or 30,000 where they're just grateful to have a nice high school.
Right.
We need to be thinking like we're big.
Yes.
Because we are big.
Right.
And we need to be thinking forward thinking, not oh, I like it the way things were. Well, let's talk about the way things should be, or the
Right.
way things are going to be.
Goes back to doing the right thing.
Absolutely. And then, so as you look at that northwest side of town, yes, the southwest side of town, we can talk about that all day, you know, with the tracks and Trinity and other pieces that are going in for commercial and housing. But that northwest is going to boom too.
Right.
The newest houses that are being built right now, right next to the high school.
Yep.
The newest businesses that are coming to the city and to the chamber and saying, I'm going to go somewhere in town, guess where? If they're not going on South Broadway,
Right.
where the traffic is,
Yep.
they're going in Northwest Minot.
Wow.
So if people can understand that and realize that growth out there, both on both sides of the bypass,
Yeah.
is real and probably only happens this fast because of the high school,
Right.
well, then let's get on board with this, folks.
Right. Let's do it.
Let's understand that this is how you grow smart within your existing infrastructure. These are infill spots. We're not just building 3 miles outside of town or 2 miles outside of town. We're building within city limits.
Right.
We're building smart and building in businesses that are needed on North Hill,
Right.
needed for Minot.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's a long answer to your short question, but I think that's the future of what a new high school means.
Right.
On top of the fact, let's not ignore, I've got 2 teenage daughters. They're both in high school here in about 6 weeks. Now we have 2 high schools that allow 2 football teams,
Yep.
2 first chair trumpet players
Right.
in the symphony and the orchestra, 2 debate teams, okay, 2 valedictorians,
Right.
2, so we've got twice as many opportunities for these kids.
Right.
And that's awesome.
It is.
That's what we need more of, so that now that family comes in and says, man, I'm not competing with 2,000 other kids. I'm competing with 1,000. That feels normal to a lot of people in the U.S.
Not only are you only competing with 1,000 as a city, I think of a lot of things through the MLB, where they have their minor league system and everything's about development.
Yep.
If you don't have people in the minor league system that are good, you're
never going to be a good baseball
You're never going to be a good
Right.
baseball team. We're going to spend
And we
a
need to
load of
develop
money.
those kids,
Right.
We expose them to careers, help them understand that, whether it's a welding career, a business, an entrepreneur, a nursing degree,
Yeah.
you can get all of those things in Minot.
Right.
You don't have to go anywhere to get a degree in any of those things. And if you choose to go somewhere to get that, you can come back and work in that field right here.
Right here.
So
Yep.
don't feel like, whatever those decisions are for those kids, you've got great opportunities here in Minot.
Right. Absolutely. That's awesome that there'll be a greater opportunity for development of our own kids as well as the North Hill. Excited for what that's going to look like. I think Tires Plus or Trusted Tire
and Auto.
Trusted Tire and Auto is going in out there.
Valvoline up there.
Yep.
I won't mention the other restaurants
That's
that
great.
are talking to the city, but
Yeah.
there are a few out there. And
Right.
I think it's just the tip of the, it's the tip of the spear. We're going to see a lot more people coming up there and saying, this is serious. And
Right.
they're going to plop down their commercial building. They're going to plop down their strip mall. And that's going to provide more opportunities.
That'd be huge. Very cool. You mentioned South Broadway. I recently had a kid, 6 weeks old now, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. Outside one of our windows, we got to look at the Maverick. It said Maverick on the building, which is part of the tracks.
Okay,
Got to see as that developed a little bit, and now as with doctor's appointment, you go back every once in a while. You get to continue to see that development. What's going on with the tracks? I know we know a little bit about it, but we've seen.
Well, I don't know the latest up to date with Epic.
Yep.
I apologize for not having that.
You're good.
The most up to date information. I know that they're excited.
Yeah.
Epic is doing the Big M building downtown, and that's going forward strongly. I think that there are lots of opportunities for us as a community to embrace those developers from North Dakota who are doing things in
Right.
North Dakota, and that's what we have with Epic.
Mm-hmm.
Todd Burning is from Minot, and Blake Nybakken and their crew. These are people who get us.
Right.
We need to wrap our arms around them and not shove them away. So from a developer standpoint, Epic is doing it right. They're planning on doing retail space or office space on the first couple floors, and then apartments in the floors above. And this is a model that's worked well at Beaver Ridge.
Okay.
That building's 15 years old almost at this point. They built that. That was one of their first buildings like that.
I think that gets overlooked.
It does, doesn't it? We often say, well, look what they did in West Fargo, and the lights is beautiful. And look
Right.
what they did over here, and they're opening up another one in Grand Forks. Well, they did that already here. This is just on a bigger scale.
Right.
And is going to say to the community, we're invested long term. And I love that. I love that all of our developers do that. Some can't do that to that scale like an Epic, and I understand that. If you can't, develop what you can.
Right.
Whether that's homes, whether that's commercial property, whether that's townhomes, whether it's roads.
Absolutely.
We need all those things. And so kudos to all the developers for doing that.
Very good. I'm going to transition a little bit. If there's something innovative happening on the cityscape, Mark's probably involved with it. And
I don't know about that, but
you'll play along?
I'll play along. Sure,
all right, sounds good. The two more recent things that would fall in that category is the Magic City Discovery Center and Startup Minot. And so let's talk about both of those. First off, with the Magic City Discovery Center, this is kind of a one-of-a-kind center.
Yeah, we think so.
That's happening in the northern central region. I think Bismarck has something similar to it. I'm not sure what Fargo has.
This is more of a science center, but
more of a science.
So, I'll take you back 10 years ago.
Do it.
It was right after the flood. Minot Area Community Foundation and a couple of other organizations were talking to key businesses and key groups around our community and saying, okay, we can't just dwell on the toughness and recovering from the flood. We have to really say, what's next?
Right.
What's the big thing? What do we have to go after? And I love that those conversations happened. Ken Kitzman and others led those conversations. Those are key, and with the businesses directly. And I love that they happened that way. And one of the ideas that came out of Give 360, which is a giving circle here in town, and a lot of good leaders, a lot of quiet leaders that you don't see around, waving a flag. These are just people doing good work.
Right.
And they said, why not a children's museum?
Okay.
I got to go 8 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours to the nearest thing. I see them every time I go to these big cities. Why not something here? And the idea percolates and people start, can we raise some money? And we got to have a fundraiser. And then they did a temporary museum. And a group of us were asked to pull together the founding board of directors. And we just had crazy ideas at that point.
Right.
But we didn't know what we didn't know. So we spent a lot of time learning, growing, starting to set big goals. And the big goal was a standalone children's museum. And not just the kind that maybe you or I, went to decades ago where everything's behind glass and there's maybe 3 things that you can touch and they didn't really feel real anyway. This is really a strong, STEAM-focused, hands-on exhibits and experiences for children of all ages. I say all ages because I go in there and have fun.
Yeah, that's good.
And my 14-year-old has fun.
Wow.
And I see a lot of 3-year-olds that have fun.
Right.
And so thanks in large part to a really great grant through the DOD because of our tie to the Air Force Base, over $6 million. The DCIP, the Defense Community Improvement Projects, if I've got that name right, I hope.
Yeah.
And then that was a massive grant. The city of Minot put in community facilities money, $1 million.
Wow.
And then the state of North Dakota put in $6 million in an allocation about 4 years ago for us. Because of those and amazing, wonderful donations from the private sector, $1 million from the Minot Area Community Foundation, $500,000 from Shields.
Wow.
That was a huge gift
4
years ago. Big shout out, big thank you to Lucas Hackmeister and those who were part of that team. People saw this vision. I haven't met someone, Jonathan, who said, we don't need something like that. Or, no, that's not worth my $5.
Right.
Now, maybe you don't have $5 to give, and I get that.
Right.
But, I haven't met someone, at least who said it to my face, we don't need that.
Right.
Or that's not good. Because what it does is, going back to what you're saying earlier, it educates, it informs, but that kid doesn't realize they're learning about aerodynamics. They're just building a paper airplane, and they're understanding how air flows.
Yep.
And we've got 150 of those exhibits.
Wow.
And a 37-foot tall climbing structure on the inside with a B-52 at top.
That's incredible.
So we want to embrace our area. We want to say it's about education and kids and families, and it's really about moving the ball forward.
Right.
The nearest thing similar to this is Minneapolis. It's 3 times the price.
Wow.
Or Winnipeg, 4 hours away, 3 times the price.
Yeah, plus a border.
Plus a border and a long road trip.
Yep.
So, if I could just give one more pitch, get your membership, go in and give it a try. We will be closed for deep cleaning. We do that every year for a week or two at the end of August, beginning of September. Gotcha. So that's good because that's when kids are back in school and mom and dad are back into a new rhythm. So that's going to come up soon, but we are open Tuesday through Sunday, and we've got our hours online, an active Facebook page. Come give it a try. We have seen over 20,000 visitors already in less than 2 months. And that knocks our socks off. That knocks your socks off, right?
That's crazy.
That makes you stop and go, really? We have enough? Now, some of them are repeats, clearly.
It should be.
But some are people who came up here for the state fair, and they're seeing it for the very first time. They're like, their kid is saying, Mom, I want to stay and go to that.
Yeah.
Or Dad, take me there.
And what a beautiful building that you can't miss. If you drive Broadway, you're going to wonder what that building is.
Yeah, and in large part, we're really grateful to the Minot Park District. Over $2 million gift in kind from them, including the location.
Wow.
They saw the value in it. Yeah. And then actually, as it turns out, the way the agreement works, very similar to the zoo or very similar to the Scandinavian Heritage Center, we will donate that building back to them, be able to do insurance underneath them, and as a nonprofit, we will run the facility.
Okay.
It's a tough deal.
Yeah.
It's $1 for 50 years.
Oh.
So it's a tough contract.
Yeah. Hopefully you can meet that.
Someone's got to do that. Someone's got to pay that $1 for 50 years worth of it. But it's a great partnership. And that's what's also awesome about it is it wasn't just, it would have been awesome if one person just gave us $15 or $20 million, but it wasn't that. It was truly a community effort.
Which is almost bigger.
Public and private partnerships. It was the state of North Dakota. It was the Department of Defense, thanks to the Air Force Base and their support. And it was all these different pieces that make it awesome.
Right.
When we do things all together, it's great.
Yes.
Even if one person doesn't take the credit, or even if one person isn't like getting everything they want, it's even better.
Right.
So when we work together, it's going to be better.
It's going to be incredible. Yeah, it shows right there is a great example of the community that we have, because you got all these different parts kicking in, and that's what makes, again, I've said a couple times already in this interview, but that's what makes Minot wonderful.
I agree.
If you want to know what makes Minot wonderful, go look at the different things that are popping up around Minot and actually dig into how they happened. It's people that care about the city, care about what's going on. 20,000 people in 2 months.
Yeah.
So
isn't that a little crazy?
That's incredible.
I don't think we've even hit 2 months yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where you just stop and you go, holy cow.
Right.
We knew it was going to be really nice and really good, and we wanted to make sure it was all those things, but it's really just surpassing all our expectations.
And basically what you're saying, or what I'm interpreting what you're saying as, is you have the state fair coming in, families perhaps are going there and to the state fair. It becomes a thing where people begin to make a road trip to Minot to go to the Discovery Center and check out other things, perhaps.
Absolutely. And we think that it's going to be one of those where, we have a lot of softball tournaments in town. Those came through just in the last couple of weeks. We see other events that happen.
Right.
The State B that we've held here for a number of years. So instead of, mom or dad coming up from Harvey or coming up from Castleton or Fargo or wherever they're going to come from, or Sydney, Montana, or Regina, Canada, and come to these events and stay just 2 days, they'll stay a third.
Wow.
Or instead of just staying for 3 or 4 hours, they're going to stay for 8 or 9. Well, that means another visit to the gas station. That means another visit to a restaurant. That means maybe they take a closer look at, this is a great community. Would I consider moving here?
Right.
We know a lot of people who move here do so having already visited us before. Now, it's not everybody. I mean, I'm a case in point for not having visited here before moving, but a lot of people like to check it out.
Right.
So if we can hook them, if we can have a great facility there, if we can have a great community, if things go well for them, then why not try and keep them?
Right. Absolutely. Do you guys have a number of population that you guys have a goal of reaching? And so maybe you can't share that.
Conservatively, we estimated that we would have 75,000 visitors in our first year.
Wow.
So we're going to blow that out of the water, which is fine, which is really good. I don't know what that good number is. Is it 100,000 every year?
Right.
Is it more than that?
Yeah, the zoo is in the hundreds, I believe.
Yeah, I think they're just shy of 100,000 every year.
Yeah.
And I think if we could be a good complement to the zoo, clearly the zoo is open year-round now, but we don't think of it as much in the winter.
Right.
The Children's Museum will be open year-round, and we think that it'll be used well all 12 months out of the year.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So the other innovative thing that you're a part of, well, one more thing you're a part of is Startup Minot, which is something for small businesses or people that haven't even started small businesses, the entrepreneur, to join and have their ideas fleshed out. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, and very different from the Children's Museum. So the Children's Museum, I was really blessed to be involved with that from the get-go, and has been board president a couple times, and really grateful for my involvement there and the support from my family for that. Startup Minot, I had very little to do with it.
Okay.
People for years and years have done a lot of work and effort in researching what do we need to have, what is that ecosystem, what does the environment look like for growing entrepreneurs, for growing small businesses, and unfortunately, certain things happened where it didn't quite get off the ground, and We almost started a Million Cups kind of effort right before COVID. Well, and then COVID hit. And then we took a look at some of these other things, and ultimately about a month into my job, I got pulled aside by a few people and said, got to have the chamber involved with a startup effort, with what our entrepreneurs need. And so took a deep dive into it, looked around the communities in the upper Midwest. What are people doing? Mm-hmm. The concept of a startup is not a novel idea. Just tagging the name Minot at the end of startup is not a novel idea. There's Startup Sioux Falls has it.
Yeah.
Plenty of other places have that. And so what really makes it interesting to me is we're trying to just meet the entrepreneurs where they want to be met.
Right.
And we found that there was a lack of some training courses. Okay. So we have a basic 10-week training course.
Right.
And it's 3 hours a week. It's called Startup Minot Academy, powered by Co-Starters.
Yes.
And so we use a national, international training manual, and we walk you through a 10-week course. It's $150 to take the course. It's a discounted rate because we have sponsors who help with that. But really, truly, and then we have a monthly networking event, and it's pretty simple. About 25 to 35 people attend on a regular basis. It's not the same people every time. We always hear from speakers, people who have gone through that entrepreneur story, or maybe just started their business, or maybe they have a real big story they want to share. So we hold those two events, but really what we do is we try to meet entrepreneurs where they want to be met. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them just don't know how to start or don't know who to go to.
Right.
So we put them in touch with, and these are all committee members who make up Startup Minot. We put them in touch with Service Basin Planning Council and North Dakota Small Business Development Centers. Mary Beth is great in town, and she does the Small Business Development Center. And Brazelda and her team are awesome at Service Basin Planning Council, and the city of Minot's great. And the MSU Severson Entrepreneurship Academy is right there. And all these other pieces, and the banks, and the credit unions, and the private sector, and folks like Jonah Lanto, an entrepreneur himself who supports Startup Minot, and Kevin Black, who's involved, and all these individuals who say, we got to have more happening.
Right.
I just do the formal stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's not my gig.
Right.
I just happen to have to, roll through the paces, and I show up with the stuff, and I pull the stuff down when it's time to go. It's really about the entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's about the networking. I had a good entrepreneur here in town. Actually, he lives in Douglas, North Dakota. And he approached me, and he spoke recently at a Startup Minot and told me about 3 or 4 weeks later, he said, as a result of that, I got more business. Someone else was attending, made a connection, and now I'm selling more of my product to this business.
That's huge.
And he said, I'm coming back to Startup Minot.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we want. And not every time is going to be a massive success. No. And for some people, they just want to hear what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And then 5 years down the road, that dream or vision may happen. Mm-hmm. So it's not, you can't strictly say, well, how many businesses did you create? No. It's hard to do an ROI like that.
Right.
There's not a measurement that says that, but there's a feeling and a vibe.
Yeah.
And there are people who say, man, we can be doing this, and now we can be doing more. So what does that more look like?
Right.
So that's actually what we're going to be asking entrepreneurs over the next 6 months or a year is, what do you want? What are the next steps?
Right. Very cool. You've had a couple businesses launch. I don't know all of them. And obviously you just mentioned that's not like an ROI. That's a huge focus, which makes sense because it's not that type of group. But I believe Amanda Olson.
She did, yeah, New Beginnings. She actually took the course and spoke at the event.
That's awesome.
So as I mentioned, there are 2 events. There's 2 opportunities. One is the training course. And by no means do you have to be into public speaking or go to speak at the event.
Right.
And that's a small cohort of about 10 or 15 people. That 10-week course actually starts up in early September.
Okay.
So I'll put a little plug in. If you want to do Startup Minot, just Google us or go right to the Chamber website and plug in Startup Minot. You'll find the information or give me a call at the Chamber office. We'd love to have you in the cohort. Yeah. But that has had 60 graduates over the first year and a half. And those graduates are everything from an established business who's having to take a left-hand turn 5 or 10 years in and wants to know how to do that and learn some more business tactics. People with crazy ideas who at the end realize that their idea is crazy and they don't need to do it. Right. And others at the end who say, no, I'm ready for this.
Right.
And Amanda's an example of someone who's ready for it. And she worked on her business plan for a year.
Yeah.
And she just had to have a few more things, a couple more things in place. And now she's got a growing business that just started. That's awesome. So those are great success stories.
Probably a really good example of, not to talk, she's not here, so we don't need to talk about her, but in general, a good example of how that community that you create through that helps an entrepreneur. One of the most difficult things in entrepreneurship is the loneliness of it. Is you don't have a community that you get to plug into. You're having your crazy idea and you're on an island by yourself. And how do you overcome that?
Personal experience too, Jonathan?
Probably, perhaps,
You've started
maybe a little bit.
Businesses?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so being able to create that community for them is huge, because now suddenly when they have the idea at 11 p.m. at night, they can go to someone on Thursday morning at 7:30 and they can bounce off people and they can say, yeah, that's a crazy idea, don't try it. Or, you know what, there's something to that. This is what some things you might need. And all of a sudden it begins to round out and something bigger and someone to check into accountability.
I couldn't say it any better. That's perfect, because at those startup events every second Thursday of every month at the Carnegie Center, at those events are bankers and private sector investors and another entrepreneur with a crazy idea, and an entrepreneur who spoke at the event 4 months ago, but who's coming back for the first time because they want to keep learning and growing. And so it's a real mix of people in there.
Right.
And then, between the 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 of us that kind of help pull this off and make it possible, give any of us a call.
Right.
We'll all help out.
Which is big.
I've never personally started a business. It actually scares the bejeebers out of me. But I feel like I can support you and support many others who do, because that's part of our community.
Yes.
And I can help them grow and be a cheerleader and maybe point in a good direction and encourage or invite them to do something. And I can be part of that ecosystem.
Yeah. It goes back to the wonderful community that we have in Minot.
I agree.
So, well, we've talked about a lot. I think it's incredible just to hear the growth that's happening in Minot over the last 20 years and even now. I mean, to have going back to the staggering number, 20,000 people at the Discovery Center means that you have a thriving community and people that care about what's going on in the community. So, kudos to you for your part in that. And anything you want to add as we close out?
I talk about it a lot, and I think I shared this at the ribbon cutting we held for the Children's Museum a couple months ago. You can't do it without your family. So really appreciative of my wife, Catherine, and our kids. And, I end up giving up a fair amount of time in other ways.
Yes.
And they are very supportive of that. I know that's true of a lot of people. I look at the Children's Museum, whether it's Wendy Keller, who did a good job to go work at a nonprofit, or Karen Rasmussen, who and so many others, Jessica Henderson. I mean, you could name a lot of people who make these things happen. And what's awesome about it is no one's looking to toot their horn. They're all just like, okay, I hope it's going well. Now I'm on to my next thing, or I'll find a different way to volunteer or support. And they're just as supportive of all the other good things that are happening in town. And I think you could do that for a lot of things. I look around at a lot of the different efforts that happen in town. A lot of them happen very quietly. Yeah, I'm just really grateful that people are willing to do more and to try hard and to make these things happen. It benefits me. I'm going to do it because it benefits you. Right. And so together we can do it.
Amen to that. Together we can do it. Well, is there any breaking news you want to drop of new businesses coming to mind or anything like that? I'm kidding. I'm not here to put you in a hot seat.
Good question.
You don't need to answer that.
Check the hot sheet.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Mark, appreciate you coming on Minot Matters today. Really appreciate your time, appreciate your in-depth knowledge of the city of Minot. And to all those watching, this is another episode of Minot Matters. Follow us at the Dakotan. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our Facebook page. Thank you to Shock Safe and Lock for sponsoring this episode. And